Now, it's behind this closed door here that one of the pinnacle moments in the film takes place, that in which David Kessler turns into the four-legged hound from hell. Now, for Rick Baker, it was without a doubt the biggest test of his career, to realistically show the transformation from a young man into a werewolf, while at the same time using bright, harsh fluorescent lighting, a special effects sequence which to this day remains the most impressive in cinema history.
The transformation that Rick and I had discussed for years, finally I wanted it in bright light. I wanted no cutaways. He even said to me, make me storyboards. I hate making storyboards, but we did for the werewolf stuff. You know, we really discussed it a long time, and then he realized it.
John definitely had input in the stuff that he did in Werewolf, and he also was good about, you know, you're the guy, you're the artist that does this stuff, you do it. Do, you know, a certain amount of time to make this stuff. You know? And all of a sudden it was like time to ship stuff to England, and we weren't totally ready. So we had a workshop in England, which was in Richmond, which is near Twickenham, and it was this old abandoned schoolhouse where we finished most of the stuff. The change-o heads were finished there. We punch and hair the change-o head in Richmond, finishing these parts. I mean, John was smart because I said, you know, the makeups take a while, so we can't do a lot in a day. So he figured the transformation would be like a post-production thing.
It took us a week to shoot it. We'd shoot 1, maybe 2 shots a day with David Naughton in a makeup preparation for maybe 4 or 5 hours.
6 days of shooting, 10 hours a day. You know, 5 a.m. call and come out in the afternoon. It was a long week.
Jesus Christ! I always thought if your body's going to go through such a huge change, it's going to hurt. I wanted it to be painful.
David was going to rip his clothes off. He says, I'm burning up or whatever it is, and be standing there in this brightly lit room. And, you know, the first thing that happens is his hand, he like brings his hand up. And had a really simple mechanism in it. Basically, if you have a syringe with the plunger out and a plastic tube going to another syringe with the plunger in, and you push the plunger in on this syringe, that plunger goes out. Real basic pneumatic ram. So it's basically this plastic piece with 4 syringes in it. You know, push this plunger and the hand would stretch out.
Someone I really care for, then suddenly there appears before me.
Cut around to the other side. It's one that we sculpted, stretched out. It's got the beginnings of a pad and the fingers kind of bent in a werewolf-like position. Bill Sturgeon is on the floor holding this rod that the hand was part of, and David's real arm is just down, and we tried to align it so it looked like that was his hand sticking up, which was out of, elbow was out of frame. David is not, he didn't have chest hair, he isn't hairy at all. The first thing we shot with David was him with the most amount of hair glued onto his body. And I said to John, more practical for us to shoot that first and then trim the hair, and then shoot this, and then trim the hair and shoot this, pull some hair off and trim it, and then shoot this one. So that's kind of what we did. So we didn't shoot it necessarily in sequence. Once David's change of hand stretches out, we had a makeup that matched that. So it was an appliance hand, that kind of ended here. It was with David's real thumb, but his fingers were inside the palm because the palm stretched out and they were like sculpted fingers. I just remember this day when we were putting this makeup on him, and vividly remembered David eating some fish and chips with these stupid hands on that he couldn't do anything with.
Help me!
He had cast of David's feet with syringes in it that stretched out.
Some of the most startling effects were the easiest to do, like the hair growing out of the flesh. Did he tell you how he did that?
He just this flat piece of this smooth-on urethane that, with hair punched through it.
He just did all his hair, and then he pulled it backwards so that you just screened it backwards and all the hair came out. It was really simple stuff.
And I remember we were all doing that one particular one, the change her back. And we were doing that for most of the day. It was all pneumatic with the plungers, and we were blowing air through tubes to get them to do the effect.
It was cleverly set up so parts of his bodies were obscured by pieces of furniture and things, which made it easier for us to be able to just do these individual parts and not have to make up his whole body. Then he rolls over and he lands on the ground. That's the big stretched out body that was, David in a hole in the set.
In the floor, it was another day where I'm actually in the floor of the set and couldn't get out for 4 hours or so. And I go, I don't know that, can you do this to an actor?
The set was built off the floor by about 4 feet. I think we came to that height as being the optimum height for puppeteers to work underneath, and manipulate the animatronics.
David, lying back with his arms and head sticking out a hole, and the rest of it is this whole fake body that Tom Hester sculpted. I thought was really cool.
My father's a orthopedic surgeon, so I've always been interested in anatomy and really enjoyed, figuring out how to make the veins, on the surface sort of show up at one spot and then dive down below the surface and then show up again. Not super monsterish style, but try to make it realistic in a way.
It had a couple rods sticking out the ankles that we could move the feet with. I remember when we were filming it, I was never really happy with how they were looking. And I remember after we decided we had it, and we got David out of the hole, I remember looking at the body by itself without arms or head, convulsing exactly the way I wanted it to do. I went, this is what we should have got. Why, what are you doing? Why are you doing it now? And it's like, what are you talking about? And you go, you're puppeteering exactly the way it should be. He goes, we're just trying to pull the fucking rods out, and they're just trying to get these rods out of the thing. And it was just doing exactly what I wanted, So then David had an appliance on that looked like the Change-O head #1, hair and more hair around his neck and stuff.
I mean, these appliances, there were pieces that throughout that would be applied to your forehead and nose, and then they'd blend it, and make it up, and then add hair individually, strands of it.
David was really a lot of fun to work with. He was no problem, and he had a hard part, and he had a lot more to deal with the makeups and with the long makeup time. When we put him in the hole in the ground for the transformation thing, I remember that being something like 10 hours of us goofing around and where he couldn't move. But he was great through the whole process. He never really bitched and moaned about it. And, I'm sure it was a grueling experience for him. Purposely, John wanted the head to change last. He didn't want the head to change very much because he wanted the transformation to, basically kind of almost climax with the head change. All the changeable parts we made out of a urethane that this company called Smooth On made. That was a new product at the time, and it had like an A, B, and C component. The A being the base material, and the B being the catalyst, and the C was a plasticizer. So you could plasticize this to make it more stretchy. So we did some tests, and we did like double the amount that they said you could do. So we had this really stretchy rubber. I also thought it would be something that would probably last. I was really wrong. The plasticizer continued to work on the urethane until it just turned into snot. And we also found out plasticizer attacked any kind of plastic that it was around. And we found this water-extended resin. It was this weird thing. I don't know how we found it, but it was this a different kind of resin, and it ended up working. So that's what we made the mechanisms out of.
Took a life cast of David Naughton, and then Rick sculpted from there. So he did the sculpture, did the mold. Once you do the mold, we core it out a certain thickness, and we ended up with this, which is the core that the skin goes over. And at that point, basically just cut all the pieces out, put the mechanics on, and just keep working it until it's in exactly the right place to give the effect we're looking for.
I was worried about making eyes that looked real enough and getting the eye mechanism to work in this head that was going to be stretching and moving. And we purposely closed the eyes in the Change-O head. And the eyes are squinting up in like pain because I just knew it was going to be a problem to make the eyes look right. We took a life cast of David Naughton, making an expression, a pained expression. And again, I used a clay press out of that cast and then sculpted the nose a little bit more like it's starting to change, and just changed it enough so it wasn't just human David. It was just a face cast, and then I sculpted the rest of the head and the shoulders to make the first Change-O head. And then I did another one, which was the second stage Change-O head. On that one, it's asymmetrical. One side is more human, one side is more wolf-like. And my thinking was it could start shooting on the human side. It would turn, and then it would get more out of the Change-O head. But we found out as we were shooting it, when we turned the head, in the faster in the more movement there was, you actually didn't see the stretching out of the face, which was the kind of big payoff on this whole piece. So we ended up not using it that way with the turn. We ended up just with a straight profile with it, kind of stretching and shaking as it goes out. We spent all this time making these Change-O heads, and it really took very little time to shoot it. John would say action, and we'd pull our lever that stretched the face out and push the plungers and turn the head or whatever we did, shake it a little bit, and then cut. That's it? We worked on this for months. It's like we do a couple takes and that's it. He goes, does it do anything else? No. I said, well, we've got it. And I go, yeah, that's disappointing. It's like we spent all this time and we can shoot it in a couple minutes. Suspiciously, the room gets darker for some reason. And it's mainly because he didn't want it to go all the way to the hairy wolf creature, but we wanted something there. So that very last thing that you see in the transformation was something that we just built in the last minute. It was mostly Tom Hester.
We had an additional casting of the body for the transformation scene. So we used that, folded it up into a crouched position, and then just fabricated some foam arms and shoulders. And I think there was a head, was another casting from the original wolf mold. I took that and carved it down, shrunk it down a little bit so it wasn't meant to be as big as the final werewolf. So it was all just sort of cut and paste polyfoam, and then I put latex over the surface of it and laid hair on the body, and that was set up as a rod puppet that we worked from underneath.
That's the transformation, and unfortunately, this stuff was all kind of new in its infancy, and I had a crew of basically inexperienced kids, and I wasn't all that experienced myself.
Rick was really hands-on. I mean, I was basically, I'd do it. He'd say, move it an inch to the left. I'd go back in, move it an inch to the left, show it to him. He'd say, move it a quarter inch to the right, and then I'd go do that, and I just doing it until it was exactly what Rick wanted.
He was very generous with his knowledge and his time. His manner was excellent. I mean, he never seemed to get hassled about anything in the makeup room. Just get on with the job, full concentration, spirits high.
It was brilliant. It was, and very modest with it too. Just got on, did his job and made it happen. You just stood there and watched it happen, and it was amazing, and we all thought it was magic.
It was definitely the biggest thing I had done to that point. The transformation takes place in this brightly lit room, which I wasn't too pleased about. It's nice to have shadows and moody lighting to kind of hide things a little bit.
It was totally outrageous for me to ask him to have it done in bright light. I mean, that's the most unforgiving.
Then the fact that he's playing this, it wasn't a scored piece where the music is helping us. It's like he's playing Blue Moon in the background.